Welcome to Deal Nation, where we tap into Launch Control's nationwide network to find out what's bringing in deals and how we can all work together to build generational wealth. We're joined today by Steve Trang, the host of Real Estate Disruptors podcast and a coach for some of the top teams across the country. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Looking forward to this. I'm very excited.
Man, I'm excited to have you here. You are a man who needs no introduction, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a hype up anyway, because I have the opportunity. Real Estate Disruptors is an incredible podcast. I think everybody has working in REI has come across it and probably watches it somewhat religiously. We've worked together at some of the big industry events across the country. You've been really great to the launch control team. So, to have someone of your caliber here talking to us, talking real estate, talking sales processes and techniques, I think is going to be super valuable for our audience. So really excited to jump into this.
Let's go.
All right. So tell us a little bit about your background. As much as you and I have crossed paths over the last few years, I don't actually know your origin story. So what got you involved in real estate investment?
Like a lot of people in our age range, I guess started with Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I say that because a lot of the newer kids did not start with Rich Dad Poor Dad. But back in 03, 04, I picked up the book and I read it, and it kind of opened my eyes to a whole nother way, right? Because like my whole life, it was always go to school, get good grades, get a good job, and then work until you retire, right? Like that's just the program we've all had. And so it was the first time that's like, oh wait, there's another option. And so I read the book, started buying properties with my friends. Met a real estate broker while we're buying properties, and then I saw how successful he was, or it seemed to be. So I was asking, like, how can I learn from you? He said, go get your real estate license. I'll teach you everything I know. This is 07. I say, okay, go get my real estate license in 2.5 weeks. Submit my 2 weeks notice at Intel, and I'm all in. And I'm all in real estate, and that was probably not the best way to do it. Probably wouldn't really change anything, but that's how I got started in this whole entrepreneurial journey. Was a failed realtor for multiple years. Finally started figuring it out, I want to say around 2010. And then I started buying properties from distressed homeowners, not by design, but by accident, with your home sold guaranteed or I'll buy it as the realtor. And I had enough homeowners say, just buy my house today, that I started opening my eyes to this whole other world of buying a house. Like I was aware of the world, but I didn't believe it could really work until I had multiple homeowners basically force me to buy their homes. And that's how I went down this whole house buying, wholesaling, wholetailing journey. I don't say flipping because I hate flipping. Started a podcast along the way, and then became a sales trainer along the way. Not by design, kind of fell into it, but there was a giant need. And because of how bad I am as a salesperson, I had to study every single intricacy and reverse engineer all of sales. And so I can teach it because I've reverse engineered it. And that's how I came to be where I am today.
So going back a bit to, I think you said like 2010 is when you were really starting to seeing that gap and starting to see homeowners wanting like, well, can you just buy my house today? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So how prevalent was wholesaling from a research perspective, I suppose, in 2010 compared to now? Because now with the rise of YouTube and the rise of content creation, if you want to learn, like you said, if you want to reverse engineer wholesaling or real estate investment, I mean, you can spend 3 weeks in YouTube University and get at least a decent head start, right? But I don't think YouTube University for wholesaling existed in 2010. So how visible was it?
In 2010, I mean, basically there were people doing it. My cousin was doing it. So he and I both quit our jobs in 07. I like to remind him that I quit my job first. But we both quit our job in 07. I went down the realtor road. He went down the flipper road, which quickly became the wholesaling road. So he was doing it. I knew he was having success, but I thought it was kind of like a fad that wasn't going to stick around. And then we had Chris Iman, who's been a monster since '99. And so like one of the first deals I did involved Iman. And so like, if you really wanted to learn it, you had to learn from the guys that were doing it. You could buy a course, but the course wasn't really going to be as intensive, or you weren't going to get as much information, because like the guys that were doing it didn't really have courses, because like Sean Terry was doing it, but he didn't really start the educating route until much later on. And then so I learned a lot of the intricacies from Jamil Damji, who a lot of people know as the Blue Genie and Astro Flipping.
Mm-hmm.
But he and I were doing a lot of deals together starting in 2014. Right. So I learned the intricacies of wholesaling directly from Jamil. Again, there weren't a lot of really courses or books or YouTube. There were podcasts. I think by this time, Sean Terry had some podcasts going on, but there wasn't really a lot of information.
Yeah, and I think that learning the real estate investment industry, and some of it can be book learning, some of it you can dive in
Yeah.
and research, but I think you'd agree that mentorship is vitally important, like actually working deals and
Oh,
having
yeah.
someone there.
Having someone there to shortcut the process, because you can get stuck on a question for a very long time. You get stuck in analysis paralysis. It doesn't matter how gung ho you are. If you're completely lost and you don't even know what question to ask, that can set you back months, right? And so having a mentor who you can just call and just ask him a question, and that he can answer that question with confidence and instill certainty to you, now you can take the right step with confidence and decisiveness and conviction. Versus if you're not sure and you don't have that question answered, and you might take that next step, but you're unsure, your success, the likelihood of success, just taking the right step with less confidence, can still fail, right? You might not persevere through it when you meet resistance, but if someone says, this is the way, now you'll go, even if it's hard, you'll get to the other side because you have the confidence and certainty and conviction to make it through that adversity.
Yeah, learning by example, of course, but I think you are better than anyone in the industry at helping people close more sales. That's the name of the business, right? But
Right.
that is one box in building a real estate investment business. You also need to understand the data component of it. You need to understand market evaluation. You need to understand deal evaluation. You need to understand the dispo process. You need to understand, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
Yep.
it's building a business. There are a lot of building blocks that go into that, and if working with someone or working JVing deals, I think can really help speed that process up because you're getting exposure to all of those boxes, not
Yeah.
just
I mean,
isolated training.
what I was paying Jamil in co-wholesaling fees um, is pretty comparable to what you would pay someone for like a year-long program, right? Or even
Yeah.
I probably paid him quite a bit more, those, because we were splitting every wholesale deal 50-50. Whatever his end buyer would pay, we just split it 50-50, at least as we did initially, until they
Hmm.
got wiser, right?
Yeah.
What I was paying him in dispo fees, significantly more than it would cost for you to work with a quality mentor, right? Someone that's doing it and just teaching you from experience, it'd be significantly less. That again, though, that said, a mentor is a mentor. What I got from him was far in excess of what I paid him in co-wholesaling fees.
Yeah, and it's co-wholesaling fees, right? So you're actually working live deals.
Mm-hmm.
You're coming away with experience on, if not a portfolio, depending on how you spin the deal.
Right.
Yeah. So, at what point, I forget, what year was it you said where you started making the transition and getting more into the coaching, mentoring yourself, and then obviously the media side of things?
I started coaching in 2019. That was when the demand was really at a point where like it'd be stupid not to continue down this road. So um, when I started, so Max Maxwell, who's been a big name inside our industry, I had him on the podcast. I want to say around October of 2018. So I start my podcast in May of 18. I think around October, Max comes on and he says, "Hey, I'm doing this event, Wholesaling Elite Live. Would you be interested at speaking at the event? We're gonna have like 1,000 people there." And I said, "Obviously, I'd be okay with that, right?" And
Yeah.
so March of 19, when I go up to speak, I was thinking like, what can I talk about that might be different, that might blow people's minds. So I talked about what we do, what we use in our house buying process as far as conversations in the living room. Now, that being said, there was already a monster in the industry, right? Is John Martinez. I mean, he had a whole ocean, blue ocean to himself. But I never learned from him. I never studied from him. So I thought my stuff was completely original. Turns out there's quite a bit of overlap, right? Uh, Significant overlap, not, but nowhere near the same thing. And so I go in there and I speak on stage, and for months I had people tagging me on Instagram saying, "Hey, I used Steve Trang's line and I got this deal," or I saw other things that happen, which is kind of the the reality of the world we live in, is people would just repeat my stuff verbatim without giving me any credit. But that is like how I knew what I was talking about was valuable. And so I had that event in March. I had people banging on my doors throughout April and May. I want to say mid to end of May was when I had my first event. And people came to learn again our sales process. And I felt like I can't believe people are paying me $1,000 for this. They're going to fly out to Phoenix, sit in a hotel event room, whatever, right? Conference room, and they're going to learn sales from me. And I think we had like 28 people there at my very first event. And that's when I knew, right? Like I didn't have to sell it that hard. I had people demanding it, and they walked away extremely happy with the event. So that is I don't know, that you talk about the origin story, right? Like that is the genesis of our training, was that, there was, you provide enough value, there's enough demand for it, and then people are willing to travel across the country to learn from you. And that's when it all started. It was May of 19.
Yeah, I've been involved in the real estate investment industry, largely in a sales and marketing perspective since 2019, and I know a lot of the big names in the industry, but if I wanted to just walk away now and start a wholesaling business, do what you did back in like 2007, and just say I'm gone, I'm going to do nothing but real estate investment, when I would need to go to school. Even as much as I know, like I would absolutely need to go to school. And I think that sometimes when people are, really involved in real estate investment industry, they forget how valuable their day-to-day knowledge is, and how necessary that is from a coaching perspective. Like even at Launch Control, we live and breathe text marketing every day, right? And so what I think is in my head, what sometimes feels as like the logical thing that you should do to combine your direct mail and text outreach, or what you would say in a given situation to a specific list type, it's not obvious. It's not logical. It needs to be taught. And I have to remind
Mm.
myself sometimes that the only reason I know these things is because of extreme repetition since 2019. I live and breathe it. And so having people like yourself that are able to dissect that every day and make it something that's easy to digest and easy to learn is an invaluable thing for people coming into the industry, and also just along their journey to improve.
Yeah, and you talk about, right, since 2019, you said the repetitions, and what's in between the lines of the repetition is the A/B testing. Is that I said this, whoa, that didn't work. Let's never say that
Yeah.
again. Or we said this, and like, man, the response rate was through the roof, and we don't know why, but let's make sure we do more of it, right? Like the parallel I can think, it was like, for those of us that's creating content, we've got like this brilliant piece, we scripted it, this thing's gonna pop, and then it just bombs, right? And then we record this other thing with no planning, no foresight whatsoever, off the cuff, and then it just goes viral. So we don't know why, we don't know why at the time. We know why later after we break it down, but that comes through the reps, right? So I just wanted to emphasize that in between the lines, there's the value of the experience and learning from the reps.
Yeah, and along those lines, like speaking of kind of A/B testing and learning as you go, for everyone listening, let me give you a little glimpse of what it's like to be a guest on Real Estate Disruptors on Steve's podcast. So I flew out to their offices, me and one of my coworkers here at Launch Control. Walk into the office, we've got our names handwritten on a board. guided by his team into the conference room. Steve comes in immediately, greets us, tells us what to expect. I've got a peekaboo view into the famous red room where I'm going to be recording. And we go in, there's cameras everywhere. It's this really professional set, as close as I'll ever get to being on a TV set. Made everything clear in terms of the marketing and when things were going to be published and how they were going to be published. It was just hyper professional, hyper comfortable. So really, really great experience. But I'm guessing episode 1 wasn't quite like that. So what
No.
was the development of what is now, one of the number 1 or 2 podcasts for real estate investors across the country?
I appreciate the question, as no one's ever asked me that before. So episode 1 was high quality because from the get-go, I didn't try to figure out how to do it myself. I hired a who, right? And in this instance, I have a friend who already had a podcast. So like video equipment, audio equipment, everything was good. But I'd never done a podcast interview before. So like that was completely new. The very first episode was the only episode we've ever had that was under an hour. And my wife listened to it, and she even mentioned, like, you did a lot of, okay, go on, that kind of stuff, which makes sense if I'm having a conversation with you, but can be irritating to listening to a podcast. So I had to intentionally remove those from episode 1. Hopefully I did figure it out by episode 2. The board, that's something I took from the realtor days. When I used to have you come to my office I'm a buyer's agent, you're a buyer. Well, I wanted to have a board outside so that you felt welcome when you came in. It's like, man, that guy actually took the time to think about me. And that just makes the rest of the experience easier. Having Aaron walk you around, that was something we added later on. We were trying to figure out how we can add a little more flair and improve the experience a little bit more. Because like you fill out the form before you show up with everything, but maybe something's changed. Maybe there's something else you want to talk about, right? And so he helped you be comfortable, and then you got to do the tour of the office again to make you more relaxed. And then having a little dialogue before we start also helped to make sure you were relaxed before we started, because you already had a little bit of an interview, so it's not as big a deal when you have the formal interview.
Yeah, and the setup is, even though it is a very professional setting and there are cameras in a few different locations, it does feel like you're literally sitting across the table from you. So it does feel like an across the table conversation. Reduction of nerves just by the
Right.
setup you guys have.
And that was a lesson too, right? Because like we went to the talk show format where we had the desk and the chairs, right? And we did it because it looks great, but the experience was diminished. And I want to say after 2 or 3 months, we figured that out. And then we went back to the table. So Aaron, he even pointed out, it's like, Steve, I don't know when exactly your show got boring, but it's gotten boring. It's like, okay, well, let's try to figure that out. And it was when we went from the across the table to the night show format. And so we went back to the table format.
Something that I've already noticed, Deal Nation is in the early days still, but something that I've noticed right away is even interviewing people that I know quite well in the industry, I'm finding that I'm really learning a lot by just having this opportunity to have deeper conversations and follow tangents with people. I kind of find myself, and I think I've noticed in replays, watched myself like writing things down because I was like, oh, that's good, right? Things that I want to personally remember for my own personal investment journey, So did you find something similar when you started bringing people in of just your own kind of learning path and journey?
Absolutely. I mean, selfishly, I was asking questions for myself for the longest time. Having the biggest wholesalers come into my podcast, because at the time, again, look back to 2018, podcasting had been around, and I thought like there's no way like this would have any traction, but we'll see. But we picked up a lot of traction really fast. So I got the opportunity to bring in the biggest wholesalers in the country and have them fly into Phoenix while I got to pick their brain, right? Like if you wanted to take these guys out to lunch or go sit in their office for a day, it's going to cost a lot of money. But I had the opportunity for them to fly in. So yeah, I took a ton of notes by design. I was selfishly asking questions for myself So if you notice in the earlier episodes, I talk a lot about KPIs, lead sources, like those kind of the questions that you want to know. Because even though I was wholesaling, I was never a big wholesaler. I was just a wholesaler. And so I was asking very selfishly for myself. And you'll notice that a lot of the tangents I have, a majority of the tangents I have is because I am genuinely curious about how I can implement this within my business. I'm not too big to improve.
And no one is, right, at any stage. I think that's one of the things that's really great about the real estate investment industry that I've noticed is that even people that launch control clients that are at our enterprise level and they've got big shops and they're doing seven figures, like they still go to the collective genius meetings. They still have mentors that they work with. They still call people like Jamil every once in a while and run ideas by them because everybody is still on an improvement path, even when they're up to the coach and influencer level, they still want to
Mm-hmm.
learn.
Yeah, it's an insatiable appetite. I mean, that's our number one core value is growth mindset. In our organization, the day you decide you don't need to grow anymore is the day that we're going to start looking to replace you.
So on the podcast, when over the years, like what, and yes, I'm half asking this selfishly, but I'm curious. What have you found really resonates with the listeners? So you posted your numbers recently?
Mm-hmm.
What are your guys' numbers nowadays?
So we're hovering between 36 and 46,000 downloads per month.
Wow, that's great, and well on your way to making 100 millionaires. That's the goal, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, what have you found resonates with the listeners that the elements of the interviews, the elements of the podcast that they really gravitate towards, and how has that or has that influenced any of your processes in like the close more sales arena or in any of the workshops and events that you hold?
That's a fantastic question. And actually, I've talked to RJ about this as well, RJ Bates. Because he also has a podcast, far inferior podcast if you ask both of us, but I think he can agree on that. So what we talked about was when I'm doing the podcast, I am asking you questions from the listener's perspective. I'm not asking from my perspective. I'm asking from the listener's perspective. What would they want to know, right? Someone says something that's a buzzword. I know what it means, but I'm still going to ask the guest to clarify because they might not know what it means, right? So I think I'm always intentionally asking questions as if I was as if I was a newbie. I do that to the best of my abilities. Not perfect at it, but I do that to the best of my abilities, which translates really well into the living room because I'm trying to buy Michael's house. I can't be me. I have to listen to this conversation objectively. What's Michael thinking, right? What is another person, if they were watching this conversation when I'm trying to buy Michael's house, what are they thinking? So I'm always having a conversation on the podcast, not from my perspective, but from your perspective, as well as a third party perspective. And so again, the conversation RJ and I had is like, we feel the reason why we're good at sales is because we've actually had a lot of practice on the podcast of having a conversation between me, Michael, and what another person who's watching this interview would be thinking.
Yeah, what we're trying to do with Deal Nation in a similar kind of way is at Launch Control, our subscriber base runs from people that are just getting started in real estate investment all the way up through people who have 15, 20 years experience and are running huge shops. So our goal is to, in addition to having really industry experts like yourselves on, I want to have some of the people that are just getting started in real estate come on and talk about what their challenges are and talk about what's working, talk about what things that their places that they would need to connect because they have gaps in their knowledge base, and being able to help kind of fill those gaps. Because for if 30% or 25% of people using launch control are in the first 2 to 3 years of their real estate industry experience, they need to hear from people that are in their position. They need to recognize themselves in these conversations. So I want to make sure that we populate the roster basically with people that are hitting at all different ranges, so that people can recognize themselves. Because I'll see often, people that are in that position will add something in the comments to some of the podcasts and say something along the lines of, "I don't even know what dispo means. I'm not ready for this."
Right.
Right. And so we definitely want to touch on that a little bit as well, and catch people at each stage of their journey.
Absolutely. It's key. It's key, right? If we're going to have a wide audience, we got to ask questions. Like, I'm still surprised, right? When I go to Collective Genius, like, oh, we listened to this episode. And I always ask, like, why are you listening to my show? Like, you're so much further ahead. Why are you listening to my show? And they say the same thing. We might just catch one nugget. That's cool. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to the podcast, how are you splitting your time these days? Where's your focus in terms of REI? And then I'm going to ask a very redundant question because I know the answer to this, but just for you to speak about it. Close More Sales is not just focused on real estate investment, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So I would say my time is split between creating content, which is not probably as much as I should. It's less than 10 hours a week now. Might even be less than like 5 or 7 hours a week now these days. So spending time creating content, and that primarily involves recording or maybe writing something, but we don't write as well as we should. So we're recording content, running team meetings. I'm in 3 or 4 meetings a week, level 10 meetings. Oh, actually more now because I'm doing more one-on-ones because I'm operating as a COO for now as well. So having one-on-one with the leaders in our organization. And then some calls selling the training, not a whole lot because I have a sales team, but sometimes, it bubbles up to me because they can't answer the question that the potential client is asking. And then the last one where I spend a lot of time is fulfilling the training, fulfilling the sales, right? Because we do 2 acquisition calls a week. This will call every other week, a lead manager call every other week, a sales manager call every other week. So I host all those calls. I run them personally because I don't want to be that coach, that sales coaching that doesn't fulfill it. And then on the extra hours, because I'm working more than 40 hours a week at the moment, is I am getting obsessed with our marketing. So I'm jumping in marketing coaching calls. I'm in the mornings and early mornings and on the weekends, I'm working on copy and split testing and advertising, running our own Facebook campaigns, LinkedIn campaigns, and so on. And some people might say that's crazy, but I've hired multiple agencies. It's never worked. So I'm just going to learn everything I can about it so that I can hire the right person internally.
Well, I mean, you said at the opening of this conversation, you learned about sales by reverse engineering, by diving in and asking all of the little questions and figuring out what worked and what didn't, A/B testing. So it seems only fitting that you do the same thing with other elements of your businesses, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's how I'm spending my
So
time.
on the you were mentioned marketing and getting more involved in marketing. With marketing or sales or really building any business, you'll hear the term tech stack, right? Like you need a CRM and you need a text engagement tool like Launch Control, and so you have that tech stack. For your perspective, especially somebody starting out, like those people that I mentioned that would come on as a light user for Launch Control, what would be your education stack for someone coming in? What would be the first
Tech
block,
stack
and
for
then where?
education.
Yeah, for education. So what would be the first educational block, and then what block would Close More Sales be? Where would that come in the stack?
So as far as like big blocks at high level, number one is marketing, because if you can't get the phone to ring, it's all a moot point. It's all irrelevant
Mm-hmm.
if you can't get the phone to ring. So number one at high level, the big block is marketing. Number two after that is sales. And sales, because if you can't get ink on a contract, again, it's all irrelevant. So those are the 2 things you need to figure out as fast as possible. Operations is important, but it's not mission critical, right? Because what's the term? MVP, minimum viable product, right? All you need to do is get the phone to ring and close them. That's it. And if you can get those 2 things right, you can pay for everything else. You can pay for a CRM, you can pay for ops, you can pay for employees, you can pay for VAs, you can pay for someone to manage the finances, the QuickBooks, and everything else. But the 2 things you got to get done is marketing and then sales. Marketing is really, really hard when you first start, but it's actually extremely easy after you've got a few friends in the business. If you join a mastermind, you're in a Facebook group, you're squatting up. Marketing is actually really easy because it's just copy and paste and math. That's it, right? Um, and after that is sales. And sales is one of those that's often overlooked. It's really easy to overlook because there's no way, there's not a great feedback to tell you that you're losing sales. All you can measure are the sales you're getting. Did I get the sale? Yes or no? But we don't really measure the sales you didn't get. We didn't measure how many sales you lost because you said the wrong thing at the appointment. And you didn't know what you said wrong to lose the appointment. Something as simple as like, well, Michael, like, what do you think about this? I used to ask that question all the time. And I didn't know that that's the actual absolute worst question you could ever ask in a sales appointment. And I didn't know that, right? Because what do you think about all this leads to, well, I need to think about it some more. So and instead I was like, well, how do you feel about, everything we talked about so far? And now they're gonna start talking about, what, man, like this is rough, this is heavy. I feel like I need to do something about this right away. But if I didn't learn that, then I would keep doing it. So sales is just, there are a lot of people that think they're great at it and they don't realize how bad they are at it. And so sales is something that's super, super critical. Again, we have the blessing of working with the best teams in the country. So we're able to share on like what's best practices and so on. But yeah, I would say marketing, and marketing goes super deep, right? Because you got making sure that we're pulling the list, that we're skip tracing the list, that we're text blasting the list, that we're maintaining the list for list health, making sure we're recycling the list. There's a lot going into that, right? And a lot of it can be done by VAs. But then there's also like someone, the engineering accountant brain, someone in your organization, which is not going to be you because if you're a business owner, you're not wired this way. Is someone needs to actually check the ROI, right? Like, hey, on this list, how much did we spend? What did we collect? How fast did we collect it, right? If we spent $100 in August, when did we get that $100 back, right? Was it December? Was it February? That's too long of a cash conversion cycle so that you can potentially run yourself out of business. Even though you have all the contracts on the board, you might run out of money before those contracts close. And so there's a lot that goes into marketing, but at a high level, it's copy and paste and math.
Well, the one thing I will disagree with a little bit is
Sure.
that we're talking about, let's say we start with the sales process, right? And you go through that process of really learning how to converse with a homeowner. Because being great at sales in another industry doesn't necessarily translate to being great at sales when you're talking to a homeowner in a distressed situation. I think you and I have talked about this. It's you're solving their problem. You're not purchasing a property, right? Like it's that
Right.
you are, but in order to get that end goal that you want, you have to listen, recognize what their problem is, and recognize what solution that you can provide that's going to solve for them in a way that they're willing to use you as their resource, right?
Absolutely.
Um, so from that becomes a certain level of understanding of the recipient and understanding of what kind of tone that you need to use, the kind of phrasing that you need to use, the simple, and you can give examples of this, of simple tweaks in the way that you phrase something that can have a tremendous difference in whether or not something converts. But until you've defined that, you have nothing to copy. You have nothing to put into your marketing, right? So
Yeah.
if you separate the two, you treat marketing as you just say whatever, and you don't turn the charm on until the sales process, then those numbers that you're talking about, those conversion numbers, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars lost because you didn't make the right tweak to phrasing, you know?
Yeah. It can make or break your business. I mean, something as simple as like, and Michael, I'm curious, why are you selling again? Right. And now you're like, okay, Steve's curious versus, all right. And why are you selling again? It's like, okay, like, are you just reading a script? Is this like a checklist? Like, do you care why I'm selling? Or are you just asking this so that you have something to write down?
Mm-hmm.
Same words, but the way it lands is like, does this person care about me, or am I just a bag of money? So it's not even the words, it's the how you say the words. How do you convey this message such that it lands the right way when you're having a conversation to demonstrate that you truly care and that you are demonstrating maximum empathy.
So this got brought up in an earlier episode of Deal Nation, but I'd really like your take on it. So being empathetic on a single phone call, right? Like you text me and say, Michael, this person might want to sell their house. You should give them a call. I think it might be a good deal for you. And I go, okay, I have this opportunity in front of me. I'm going to think through what I'm going to say. I have my internal, script that I'm going to use. Call them up. I'm full of empathy. I'm helping them out. I'm a solutions provider. Right? How do you help people maintain empathy at volume? Because a lot of, as people scale up, now you're talking about, you're doing, I don't know, 25, 30 discovery
Mhm.
calls a day. How are you maintaining that level of empathy and not getting into, so why are you selling again? Have you done any repairs recently? I can get you on the phone with my colleague. In being in this like rote kind of mode. How do you keep that
Yeah.
empathetic approach?
Well, we hammer in our training. I say over and over again, your job is to make sure if you want to win, the other person has to feel seen, feel heard, feel understood over and over again. Do not be the EMT who's laughing while they're holding a guy in a stretcher who's having the worst day of his life. Right. So we really belabor this point. We really drive it in is that people do business with us because we see them, they feel important, they feel validated. So we really, really drive this home in our training. As far as how do you maintain it, it's your freaking job. It's just like you pick up the phone to call somebody. It's just like you put the notes in a CRM. You're empathetic. And like we can get salespeople to do the right behaviors if we can tie the outcome and the output to those behaviors. So I can show on the call, if we do a call review, well, the reason why you didn't get this sale is because the seller didn't trust you. And the reason why they didn't trust you is because you were doing this. So look, you can keep doing it your way. And if you're okay with the outcome you're getting, keep doing it your way. But you had shared with me, it was really important to you to make an extra 20K this month so you can buy her an engagement ring. You wanted to make an extra 30K this quarter so that you can take your family to Europe. Whatever it is, if we can tie the behavior to the outcome, now we're getting them to consistently demonstrate the right behavior. Again, like for me, empathy is the same thing, is one of the most important attributes. But demonstrating empathy is for me just like putting notes into the CRM. It's just like picking up the phone and calling somebody. It's just the same as driving to the appointment. Like it's your job. And if you're not going to do your job the way you need to do it, again, that's okay. It just is it's a message to me as a business owner that I need. It's a reminder to me as a business owner that I need to keep recruiting because you're going to get replaced.
Yeah, I think something that's really, we come across with in any kind of marketing, but certainly we come across in launch is, at what point it becomes the responsibility of the closer, and at what point it is the responsibility of the media, right? So like, we have our done for you service, which it's called Launch Leads, and we purposely draw a line, kind of like the line down the middle of the screen here, that
Mm-hmm.
is, we don't do discovery calls. We will do the text marketing, which we're subject matter experts at, and we will gauge interest to the point that someone is willing to have a phone call. At which point we try to do as close to a live handoff as we can and get someone onto your team from your team to pick up that call and have that empathetic conversation. And so if we push over, let's just say 30 discovery calls in a short span of time, how many of those discovery calls convert is not necessarily indicative of the leads that were transferred over, as much as the process of closing that goes on once those leads have been handed over. So I like the idea that you guys are looking at this in terms of the end result, right? Because
Yeah.
it's easy to look at it and go, well, we got 3 deals. Those 3 deals equaled 65K, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how many of the 15 discovery calls that didn't close, what was the opportunity cost to there? Because if it's a distressed house and they were willing to talk to a wholesale investor or an off-market investor about solutions,
Mm-hmm.
there's a very good chance that they went with somebody. They
Right.
just didn't go with you.
So I look at sales. There's two contradictory ideas that are happening at the same time. The first one is it's their job to say no, right? It's their job to say no, because if it was their job to say yes, I wouldn't need a salesperson, right? So they're gonna require work to get them to change their minds, to get them to change their existing state. But the second thing is, I am screwing this up. I am screwing up this sale in one way or another if I'm not getting the contract, because we had a person that's motivated, that needs help, and was willing to talk to me on the phone. So if I don't get the sale, that means I did something wrong, right? Like, I believe that we should be able to close 100% of the appointments of motivated people, 100%. Now, is that realistic? No, right? You can't shoot 100% of the free throw line. You can't close 100% of your appointments. But where did we go wrong? I don't know, but that's what we got to diagnose, right? I mean, I think we should be able to close consistently. We should be able to close half of them. If they're sufficiently motivated, we should close at least half of them. But nobody closes half. And so I think, you look at the difference to say maybe like, Steve Nash at the free throw line versus, I don't know, trying to think, Shaq, right, at the free throw line. Like,
I knew that was coming.
Right. But like, there's room for improvement, and a little improvement can go a long way. So, yeah, I think if you're not getting the sale, you've got to evaluate why you're not getting it, because that is where the opportunity is. Not spending more in marketing, but closing the opportunities you've got.
Right, and it's a big part of business analysis. So your marketing cost, like annually for something like launch control, you can cover that in a single deal, right? So it's not that high of a cost structure for your business. But if you're looking at those discovery calls that didn't close, like you said, like 50% would be phenomenal, beyond phenomenal. But in that a 5% margin or 7% margin of potential improvement, that 5 to 7% margin of potential improvement could be 200 grand over the course of the year, depending on how much you're doing, right? Like, depending on the size of your operation.
If you go from 10% conversion to 20% conversion, you literally doubled the revenue, right? You literally doubled your revenue. And with the costs being fixed, you more than double your profits. So
yeah,
it's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer, an amazing way to look at it. And it's a good reminder too, if you can look at your profits month by month and just go, okay, if I could double that without changing my marketing, without changing my any kind of spend structure, without hiring more people, if I could just squeeze more out of the leads that are already coming in, we take a lot of the same kind of philosophy from the marketing side, and it's people spend really good money on data, and you'd be amazed at how many people leave really closable, viable leads in the inbox because they're trying to move at speed and they're trying to get people onto a discovery call. And there are so many leads that get left in the inbox that just needed a nudge. They needed one more question. They needed one little empathetic little, well, I forgot to ask. And that would re-engage the person and get them onto a call. And, there's each one of those is a potential 20 grand, right? So, and again, you're not going to get 100% of them. You're probably not going to get 50% of them. But if you got 2 of them, that added 40 grand to your month. Like it's a very big difference. And when you add it up over the course of the year, $500,000, right?
Small hinges for massive swings.
Yeah, exactly. So when people come to you, what are the sort of biggest misconceptions that people have about sales? Like you mentioned, those that people come in, they think they're really good at sales. So what are the biggest misconceptions that people have, and then what are the biggest kind of aha moments for them when they work with you guys?
One of the biggest ones is they think that they're the hero of the story. You follow the hero's journey. They think they're the hero, and hero. And you got Luke Skywalker and Yoda. You got Frodo and Gandalf, right? They think they're the hero of the story, and the way that I'm the hero of the story sounds like is like we're the best buyers. We pay the most. We've got all these reviews. We buy the most houses. We got like me, right? And nobody cares about you. Literally, like no one cares about you except for you and like your mom. Like that's it, right? Like nobody else cares about you. And so we have to have a focus on the homeowner. What's going on? How did you get here? How are you hoping we can help? What does it look like when we're able to help you? We're able to put the money in your pocket. How's that experience going to be? How's that going to feel? Now we're talking about them. So anytime we do a presentation, we push features and benefits, we talk about us, we talk about the company, we're pushing them away, and we don't realize we're pushing them away. So I'd say that's one of the biggest misconceptions. You feel you need to talk about how awesome your company is, where your company is irrelevant to the situation. I bought a lot of houses where they didn't know that our company names, and we bought some houses where they didn't even know my name, right? So like it's completely irrelevant to the situation here. They've got a problem, they need a solution. You help them buy that solution. So I'll say that's the big one. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, are there ever any situations where, in order to build trust, you have to establish expertise in some way, or you have to establish legitimacy, and
Um,
obviously you don't want to do that in a braggadocious way, but is there like a quick fix for that?
I think you can do that in any time prior to the appointment. You could send them a wow package. You could send them you can send a package before you show up. You can send it in an email before you show up. But at the appointment, it's about them and them only, right? So
Okay.
any authority you're trying to build should be built prior to you showing up. So I think that's probably one of the biggest myths in sales. The other thing is, there's this idea that extroverts have an advantage in sales. I would argue that extroverts have a massive disadvantage in sales. What they are is they're naturally good walking billboards. So they get more business because everyone knows who they are, right? If everyone knows who you are, then of course you're going to do more business. But when it comes time to talk business, and extroverts actually at a disadvantage because they feel the need to talk. They feel the need to add their story, right? So just talk about, let's say, for example, right? I tell you, beginning this call, hey, Michael, I was in Cancun last month. We had a great time with my family. And you say, oh, man, I love Cancun. I was just there. We did this, 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 and this. And you want to share, right? But you didn't even let me finish my story. Now I have to listen to your story, right? That's a disadvantage that extroverts sometimes have to fight really hard. They have to resist their urge to share, whereas an introvert naturally is more curious and wants to hear more about the other person's story. Um, the biggest thing for me personally, and for a lot of people that have gone through our training, is setting appropriate expectations. Hey, Mike, at the beginning of our appointment, I'm going to say something along the lines of, hey, at the end of our time together, either one or two things will happen. Either, we buy your property, we don't, and look, either way is okay. If the price we offer you doesn't work, or if you feel like we're not a good fit, will you feel comfortable telling me no? Likewise, if you figure out this is a house that it doesn't make sense for me to buy, or you can be okay with that. And if it does make sense, we're going to put everything in writing today. Is that fair? If I hear anything besides a yes or no, I'm just going to take that as no. Right? So, like, having that conversation up front, and that's like a really, really mini version of how we do it. It now allows me, when you get to the very end, I need to think about it. It's like, I don't understand. In the very beginning, you told me you were going to give me a firm yes or a firm no.
Yeah.
I must have done something to lose your trust. Right? So I can do this if I set the expectations in the beginning, but if I don't, and then you get to the end and you think about it, it's like I can overcome it, but it's a lot more work.
I like that you add in the conversational breaking points. So like a question like, if that number doesn't work for you, would you feel comfortable telling me no? That
Yeah.
adding in those pauses in conversation, I think, is a really good technique, because I know that a lot of people, especially going into a new industry, they're prone to babbling a little bit, right? Prone to being like, okay, so here's my experience and here's what I can offer, and we have lots of solutions we can give you, but and the person's like, can I say
Yeah.
something? Right?
Yeah.
So,
You have a
so
whole speech prepared.
yeah, and so to keep yourself from speechifying, adding in those moments of kind of emotional check-ins or logical check-ins with the listener keeps you listening and
Exactly.
not just speaking.
Right.
Yeah. So when you know for people that have worked with you, I'd love to hear just a couple of success stories of people that have come through and changes that have happened to their business, because I think it's like I was saying with our light users, core users, pro users, people want to
Mhm.
hear about the experience that they're going through. So I'd love to hear a couple of success stories that you've had. people you've worked with?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite success stories is Gino Palumbo. I think he's
Of
been a
course.
major advocate for launch control. I
Hmm.
mean, when I was working with him, he was still in college, and
Oh,
now he's
wow.
traveling all the world. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not going to take like credit for his entire success. Like the guy is driven, motivated. He's worked with a lot of people, but he's always been one of my favorite success stories. We had Ryan Weimer up in Boise, Idaho. Well, technically he lives in London, but he does business in Boise, Idaho. We've been able to help his business in multiple ways. Um, and then so we've had, we just had so many people that we've been able to work with. And it's really cool where they already had big marketing budgets and then they start working with us and then their conversions, go through. I mean, one of my favorite testimonials was, "Hey, Steve, after working with you, we're now closing 30 deals a month." Like, holy crap. I've never got anywhere close to closing 30 deals a month. Right.
Yeah.
But having someone say that, I was like, man, like we're really making a really, really strong impact. And that's incredibly fulfilling.
Would you want to close 30 deals a month?
I would want to close them. I don't want to do the work involved in closing 30 deals a month,
Yeah.
but I want the outcome of closing 30 deals a month.
Yeah, it's just I ask because it's something that's come up on this show a few times, and it's that setting expectations thing. You said like if you're in the microcosm or in micro sense of setting expectations of what you expect from discovery calls coming in and what you should be able to profit from that, right? But then on a
Right.
more macro sense is how many deals do you really want to do every month? Do you really want to do every year in order to equal the lifestyle that you got into this business looking for, right?
Oh
Because
yeah, you don't even need to do double digits to accomplish everything you've ever wanted, right?
right.
So like I said, I don't want the burden and the responsibilities of doing 30 deals a month. I just want the outcome of 30 deals a month.
Yeah. Well, and there are processes, automations, teams. There are a
Yeah,
lot of things that can go into you, like I opened the show with, building generational wealth without having to spend generational time to do it,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
But I think there's also a case for knowing your that's enough line, and being like, that's enough. I'm good. Because speaking of extroverts, the industry is full of people that are very extroverted and very
mhm,
successful and really good at hyping up, like, the scale grow kind of model. But I think there's a lot of people get into this just wanting just to do well, not
right.
necessarily change the world.
Yes, and then they get into it, and then we play the comparison game.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
fair enough. All right, so for people that are anywhere along the stage right now, because I know that you've spoken about this on your show recently. I've seen some topics of it with your emails coming through. But anybody listening, both are listen to the show, but also subscribing for the emails for Close More Sales and also Real Estate Disruptors, full of great information. So very much worth it. Um, Crystal ball on the industry in the next couple of years. What do you see coming down the pipe?
So unpopular take, I know because I've had people tell me that, is I think wholesaling as an industry will not look anything like it looks today. I think with regulations that's coming down the pike, I think there's going to be a merge where it's going to be, you're buying houses, but you're also maybe listing houses. You might be doing an installment method, but you're going to have multiple tools at your disposal, of which wholesaling might not be one of those tools. Now, there are multiple ways around it, right? It's not like, oh, wholesaling is dead, you're stuck. Like you can just wholesale it, right? Like there's all these other tools available, but I think wholesaling as it looks today might not be here in 2 years. And I think I said that on a podcast like maybe 3-4 months ago. I was like, I give it 18 months. And the reason why I say this is that South Carolina passed a law earlier this year. Pennsylvania just passed something, I want to say, in the last 3 to 4 weeks. Like there's multiple states that are using language that goes against the equitable interest argument that we've been making for decades, right? So that's the reason why I say that. But I don't say that to spread fear. I say that just like know what you have to do to overcome it. Like it's a small speed bump. It's not a brick wall, right? So when I
Yeah,
say
I
this, people
mean,
think like, oh, you're spreading fear. It's like, no, I'm spreading knowledge so that you can just pivot and resolve with it. But yeah, I
yeah, I
would say
mean,
there's that. Go
my
ahead.
reaction to that is, so what?
Right.
Maybe I'm not like seeing the whole picture here, but my reaction is so what? Because we're not in the wholesaling business. It's just that's a lazy term that we all use, but we're
Hmm.
really in the distressed property business. And
Right.
distressed properties aren't going anywhere. That's still going to
Exactly.
be a big swath of the real estate investment industry, and sellers in that position are still going to need solutions. So if
Hmm.
the barrier to entry becomes, you get licensed and you have to JV a couple of deals with a known investor to build up a little bit of equity so that you can wholesale or take other avenues. That's a very small barrier to entry, right? Like
Right.
the only thing that gets removed is coming in and being able to potentially work a deal with zero money in the bank and just get that first wholesale deal so that you can
Hmm.
have 15 grand to work with or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe that gets waylaid a little bit, but
Yeah. You leave your exit
everything else
strategy
in
as
the
is.
industry, it's just a little bit more education and a little bit more working your network, and otherwise, nothing really changes, right? We're
Yeah.
still in the distressed property business.
The supply of distressed homeowners is not going anywhere.
Yeah. And you know what I think is like, correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but what I think is actually a positive to this is that anything that comes from wholesaling, I just did it. I just made the same mistake I called out. The distressed property business, right, is it's about solving problems for people, right? And
Right.
making people feel that they can trust you. And so
Hmm.
when someone gets to the place where they feel like they can trust you, and then they find out that you just turned around and sold that home hours after getting it under contract, they feel duped, right?
Hmm.
So if any new regulations that are coming down are just removing the duped factor and having you be a bit more straightforward with what you intend to do with that property, doesn't that just build up the profile of the industry in a positive way?
Yeah. I mean, we're seen as vultures, but like the people that benefit from what we do don't seem to complain. They complain about how it's done, but they don't complain with the result, right? Like every time someone buys a home that's flipped, no one complains that they got a great home that's been completely remodeled that looks like it came out of HETV, right? No one complains about that, but they complain about how we got there.
Yeah. But I mean, a lot of times it's simple fixes. Like the scripts, like if anybody listens to this transcript of this, or goes back, rewinds and listen to what you said, like even your off the top of your head script that you gave was
Yeah,
very transparent, setting clear expectations, making sure that the person understood what your intentions were. You weren't promising the world, you weren't giving anything false. You were coming at it from a place of empathy and honesty, right?
exactly.
So that coming at it from a place of empathy and honesty, that that erases a lot of the current misconceptions about the industry. Because like I've read
Mhm.
some articles on big news sites like Yahoo.com or NBC or whatever, right? And
Mhm.
and they're about the distressed property market, and there are people saying, well, I don't know if it's a scam, and there are scammers out there, and I'm like, where? I'm sure
Yeah.
that it exists. I'm sure that it exists. But like, I've been in this industry for 5+ years. People are in it to help homeowners. And yes, they're in it to make a profit, but nobody is scamming anybody. It's a very legitimate subsect or niche of the real estate investment industry. So I just feel like the more transparency there is around that and what happens with those properties, I just feel like that raises the profile of distressed property acquisition and homeowners' willingness to participate in that if they don't have the MLS traditional route as an option.
Yeah. I mean, I got a text message yesterday, right? We closed on a property yesterday, and I got like the nicest text message from the homeowner, right? And she was so incredibly grateful for what we were able to do for her. You wouldn't believe that if you weren't aware of this industry, right? If you thought we were vultures, but I mean, I got like the nicest messages, and like those are the best messages I get is when we help out homeowners.
I know. And you and I have talked about this though. What kills me, and I mention it all the time, is people are sitting on those great responses. They're sitting on those great testimonials, those interactions with homeowners that they're in marketing terms giving them testimonials of saying this product was great. It was everything that I read that it was going to be. 5 stars or 4 stars. I didn't get as much as money as I wanted, but it was still a great solution. And they're not publicized anywhere. They're not shared with the homeowners. They're just pride moments sitting in an inbox. Meanwhile, everybody's going out and publicly saying that, oh, I closed 30 deals last month and I brought in X amount of money, and all that's public. But the homeowner being like, Steve, thank you so much. I don't know what I would have done without you. My house would have the bank would have taken my house. I can't thank you guys enough. I hope I'm never in that position again, but thank you. Where are they? I know they're there. They're sitting in inboxes, but nobody ever flaunts those,
Exactly. It's a great point.
All right. So I've kept you for quite a while at this time. At this point, I know you're a busy guy. Anything else that you want to bring to the attention of the listeners before we wrap things up? And we'll of course put all of the URLs and links in the episode description.
Yeah, so we put something together. So I have a book, it's on Amazon. I want to say like $29, something like that. So we're giving that away for free. Everyone that's listening. So that we got the book, we got the perfect appointment script, the call review tool. It's like I had one of our clients ask me like, hey, what do you listen to on calls? And so I wrote down it's 3 pages worth of stuff I'm listening for on calls. So we have that. We have a 2-hour breakdown of one of my events. And so we have all of that. And then I have Ian Ross in my team, who's an incredible salesperson and sales trainer. He's doing a sales process review for anyone that wants it. So if you guys want that, text the word script to the number 33777, and you'll get, again, the book, the scripts, the call review tool, and a whole bunch of other bonuses. But I think probably the most important is the opportunity to talk one-on-one with Ian about what your sales process looks like today. And we're doing all that at no charge.
And did you say 33777?
Correct.
Okay. I'll put that up real quick on the screen in case anybody's watching. That's the number that Steve just mentioned. Grab your screenshot. And yeah, we have Ian coming on Deal Nation in a week or so. So I'm really excited to dive in and talk to him. I've had a couple of conversations just in person with him, but looking forward to having him on the show for sure. That'll be great.
Yeah.
So if anybody is using Launch Control and you really want to start implementing some of these things that Steve and I discussed, make sure that you reach out to him and his team. Again, the links will all be below. If you've worked with Steve and you want to translate some of those lessons into your text engagement and want to get started with Launch Control, it's launchcontrol.us, but we'll put a link in the episode description. Make sure you use that one, because if you use that link in the episode description, we'll know that it came from this episode, and our team will be able to jump in knowing that you want to talk about the combination of launch and the sales processes that come through Close More Sales. So yeah, really appreciate you coming on. Let's do this again in a few months. We'll get a time scheduled and
absolutely, that'd be great. I enjoy sharing wherever I can.
Amazing. Thanks again, Steve. Really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.